Again, if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and put it in the chat menu. I'm going to go ahead and blow up the presentation so that it takes up the entirety of the screen, and we'll get to those questions as I see them pop up. For those of you that are joining us on the phone, the notes are on my webpage at Park County Chiropractic. Go to the teleconference tab, and under you'll need a username and a password. You can apply for one of those, or you can just use our stock um, username and password, which is username is EAT with a capital E, and the password is healthy with a capital H. That will get you into all of the notes. Um, so for those of you that are having difficulty following along by phone because you don't have the notes available, this webinar will be recorded. You can come back and watch it where you can see the notes as I present them, in case there's any difficulty in figuring out where we are in the presentation. So I'd like to remind everybody that this is a collective of health practitioners mentoring one another in topics related to nutrition. And of course, who, when, and why. Anyone who wishes to join may. You select yourself. This happens on the second Monday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And the reason we're doing this is to share and build an understanding of the common and uncommon knowledge of the practice of nutrition in the care and treatment of ourselves and our patients. So the rules are that we share our knowledge with each other, and we don't compete. We're not hoarding knowledge, we're sharing knowledge. In doing that, we make ourselves and our communities stronger. So I'd like each of you to consider that if you want to learn something, you read about it. If you want to understand something, you should write about it. And if you want to master something, you should teach it. The concept of this Montana Nutrition Collaboration is that at some point we ask each of you, if you choose, to teach so that you can master this material. The presentation needs to be about 35 or 40 minutes in length with some notes available for people to follow along. It can be done in a teleconference or a webinar format, whatever you choose. And again, we would like to encourage everybody at the end to add to Q&A. So today we want to talk about herbs and kind of the nuts and bolts of beginning to become a clinical herbalist. So some of you listening today may be more advanced herbalists, and this topic may be a little bit remedial, but it's a good place to start for people who are new to herbalism and understanding a little bit about how herbs are prepared and understanding when you have a quality herb versus a lesser quality product. So we'll start at the beginning of kind of the simple stuff and how herbs are prepared. And of course, the simplest form of herb would be a whole prepared herb. And in this instance, we've got some, I believe that's milk thistle seed that's been ground. So that's the entire, constituent or the whole herb itself. And then we can kind of think of that in two ways. We can think of it as kind of the fresh whole herb, like that basket of culinary herbs, or we can think of it as the whole plant or the whole herb in a dried fashion. And when we start preparing herbs, there is a difference between a fresh herb and a dried herb. Fresh herbs are going to have more water and therefore may dilute our preparation, and therefore needs to be taken into account when we're dealing with herbal strength. So today we're going to talk a lot about MediHerb and how they prepare their products, and the majority of their herbs are prepared from dried herb. So that leads us to what's commonly a means of delivering an herbal preparation, and we call those extracts. And extracts is a pretty broad term in that it basically speaks of what we're trying to do, which is extracting those active and sometimes inactive constituents from that whole herb. And there's several ways that we can do that, and I think we should take a little bit of time of learning some traditional preparations of herb products. So in order to extract something, we need to have a solvent, or what's often called the menstruum. And the most common solvent that we use is water. So if any of you have ever made tea, you've obviously made a traditional herbal preparation using hot water. Alcohol is probably the second most common. Sometimes we use vinegar, and oftentimes many oils have been used traditionally to extract the constituents of an herb and apply it therapeutically. Some non-traditional solvents that are used, particularly in larger industrial preparations, are things like acetone, and even recently things like CO2 in a liquid form have been used to extract the constituents of herbs. Uh, Sometimes, particularly with things like acetone, uh, that will leave a residue in the herb that is not what we want to be consuming. So, not a real traditional means. I don't really like to consume fingernail polish. But when we look at just simple, and most herbs, even at the most complex, are still fairly simple in their preparation. And one of the terms that we utilize frequently is a tincture, and a tincture really means nothing more than a fluid extract using alcohol and water as the solvent. So so tinctures can be created in a lot of different ways. And in this illustration, we have some herb in a jar with apparently some French brandy and water, and that's sitting in there, and that's what they call macerating. So you leave that in there for a few weeks, and that alcohol-water combination will soak up the constituents of that herb. So when creating tinctures, and as we'll talk about later, extracts, the percentage of alcohol that you utilize for each individual herb will vary according to what constituents it is that you want to extract from that plant material. So in general, we're using somewhere between 25% and 90% alcohol. So uh, something maybe as mild as a light vodka to nearly a full grain alcohol would be common sources of things to create tinctures and extracts from herbal products. So another common way of extracting herbs is by using hot water. And for any of you that have made cowboy coffee or Turkish coffee, you're familiar with this idea of decoction. So to decoct is to boil uh, that herb in water. Occasionally, you may use some other solvent, perhaps an oil, but generally not an alcohol that will boil off if you're taking it to higher heat. So decoctions are typically water preparations, and after you've boiled that for its period of time, then you also decoct, which is a verb to pour off that extract that you have just created, and that extract we would call a decoction. So Turkish coffee we could call a decoction. And we had an example of maceration. So a maceration is a type of an infusion, which an infusion is basically where we uh, marry our herbal component with our solvent or our menstruum. And in this case, it could be water, or it could be a water alcohol combination, and it could be an oil combination. The thing that maceration is really similar to what we'll talk about next, which is an infusion, in that we're basically just soaking our herb in a solvent or a liquid. The difference being maceration is done at cold temperatures, whereas a infusion is done at hot temperatures. With one exception, typically when we talk about oils, like you see in this illustration at the bottom of the slide, like rosemary, when you put that in your olive oil, you get an infused oil. You infuse that oil with rosemary or garlic or lemon. So from a culinary standpoint, infusions, particularly oils, can be cold. From an herbal therapeutic standpoint, when we talk about infusions, we're talking about basically making tea. So we're soaking that herb in a solvent, typically water or oil. Again, alcohol not as frequently because that's going to be less stable and evaporate off. So that process of putting the herbal constituents into hot water is called steeping, which I think most of you who have made tea have already sort of figured that out. And that leads us to percolation, which is kind of likely the most common way of preparing an herb. And most of us have a pretty good idea of what percolation is because that's how most of us make our coffee. So in coffee percolation, we have soluble compounds that leave the coffee, the ground coffee, uh, to form what we drink. And those insoluble compounds remain behind in the filter. So that spent coffee ground in the filter, if we were talking about this from an herbal standpoint, is called the marc, whereas the water that we would use we'd call the solvent or the menstruum. And then our extract would be what we're drinking, which is the coffee. So percolation is the method by which MediHerb makes their herbal liquid preparations, and of course all of their tablets are made from their liquid preparations. And MediHerb has patented a process for cold percolation, which allows them to get their herbal product extracted from the materials at low temperatures, so that it's not changing the constituents of that herb. Now, strengths are typically listed on herbal labels, and they can be a little bit confusing. So I wanted to make an illustration so that maybe people can understand a little bit easier how to look at the strength of an herb when you're looking at a label. So we get this ratio, which is our ratio of how much dry herbal material or wet herbal material is utilized compared to how much solvent is used. So when we talk about a tincture, which we learned is an alcohol dissolved extract, typically a mixture of alcohol and water given a percent. So for instance, in this situation, perhaps we've got a 25% solution of alcohol with the remaining 75% being water. And we want to mix 1 part of herb with 5 parts of our solvent. And you'll notice I sort of measured these out so that this illustration would work. So we've got 1 part of fluid in this, and we take 5 parts, and we fill our beaker. Now we have 5 parts of water over here to 1 part of herb. So this is when we're talking about tinctures. Tinctures typically have a strength of 1 to 5. They can vary a little. It can be 1 to 4 or 1 to 6. And often, given the plant material, and if you were using a dry herb, you would have probably a better extraction ratio versus one that still had water in it. Because if that plant still contained water, that would dilute this tincture even a little bit further. So that's why, for most intents and purposes, when we're doing extractions, we're using a dried preparation of an herb. So traditionally, early American herbalists, which we tend to call the eclectics, that was the name that they called themselves, they practiced eclectic medicine, they prepared their extracts in a ratio of 1 to 2. So if we were to look at this, we still get 1 flower, or 1 part herb to 2 parts of water, which would make it more powerful or more potent than 1 to 5. Now, sometimes we'll run across labels that will have a liquid extract, or sometimes they call that a fluid extract, and that's a 1-to-1 ratio. Sometimes it's higher; it can be a 2-to-1, and occasionally they will talk of a 1 to 2 being a liquid extract. So again, we're getting a more potent and stronger extract. We're still getting 1 part of that herbal component to 1 part of extract or solvent. So the difficulty being is, particularly when you make a maceration, it's very difficult to get a strength of 1-to-1 because you may not have enough fluid to fully cover your herbal component. So if you've got a gram of herb, you would still need more fluid and that gram of herb may take up the entire, you know, quarter of the bottom of that beaker. If you were to fill it with alcohol, you may need a higher amount of alcohol to cover that. So this is the limitations that herbalists come into is how to create extracts that are more powerful. And that's why percolation is typically the means that's preferred for getting better extraction, because I can keep the herb in a coffee filter for instance, and pour water through it and make sure that I soak each of those components really thoroughly. If you've ever made coffee, you notice that you would get a bad batch of coffee if you didn't get all of the grounds soaking wet with your hot water. So again, one of the things that MediHerb does to ensure that process is, when I make coffee, it takes 10 minutes versus their cold percolation method that I believe takes well over a day. They keep the solvent in contact with the mark for quite a long time, so they get really excellent extraction ratios. Which leads us to what makes MediHerb really fantastic for clinicians like myself is they have tablets, and their tablets are products of their patented cold percolation process. Say that 3 times fast. So they make their cold percolation extracts, which are generally a 1 to 2, sometimes they're 1 to 1, and different strengths depending on the herb. And then, of course, in order to tablet that, they have to remove the water and any ethanol that may be remaining in the extract and get a dry material. So that dry material would then be tableted, and because it has lost its weight in water and alcohol, it will become more concentrated. So depending on the herb that you're extracting, some herbs you don't extract much. And so what you actually get out of the extract in a solids form after you've dehydrated the water alcohol would be very light but very powerful. So you can see where you might start getting strengths of herbs that are in this very high 120 to 1 range, whereas other herbs that extract a lot of material when you're doing your process, when you dry it out, may weigh quite a bit more and therefore have a still be more concentrated and have a bigger ratio than a fluid extract would allow or a tincture, but still because it's dehydrated down is going to become much stronger in strength. And that's important because that's a compliance issue. So oftentimes my patients are not very compliant with doing liquid herbs because they find them distasteful and things like that. So know that the beauty of a MediHerb tableted product is you know that you're basically giving them that which was originally made in a galenical or traditional fashion with an alcohol and water extract. Just happens to be much more concentrated, which allows you to deliver a more therapeutic dose. So therapeutic dosages are things that are going to be independent to each and every herb. And to keep it simple, we'll use a rule of thumb. And when patients bring herbs or supplements to me that they want me to look at, uh, this is one of the rules of thumbs that I use with them because I certainly don't know the therapeutic dose of every herb on the planet, and it would require me to go looking it up and all that stuff. But in general, most herbal therapeutic doses are going to be somewhere in that 1.5 to 3 grams per day, and that would be dried herb equivalent. So if somebody gave me 3 grams of oregano, that would be a therapeutic dose. Which leads us to problems with labeling and the way uh, unscrupulous companies uh, will lead us astray and give herbal medicine a bad name. So in the Archives of Internal Medicine in 2003, there was a study where they went to a dietary supplement market in the U.S. In fact, I believe it was in Denver, and they took several different echinacea products off the shelf, and they took them back to the lab for testing to determine was what the bottle says, was it actually what you were getting. And so we can just look at some quick results from the study, and it tells us quite a lot. It suggests that of the samples, 6 out of 59, so that's about 10% of the preparations, contained no measurable echinacea. So right away, you have a 10% chance of buying an echinacea product that doesn't actually have any echinacea in it at all. So further, they started looking at the species content to see if it was consistent with what was labeled on the bottle, and they found that about half, or 31 of those 59 samples, so about 52%, uh, were labeled consistent with what was in there. So, for instance, if the label said Echinacea angustifolia, what they found half of the time is that that was not what was actually in the bottle. Now, some labels will go so far or be so bold as to suggest that their preparation has been standardized, which again tells us that there is some standard that they were trying to meet with regards to the preparation of that herb. Generally, that's determined by the measurement of a constituent within that herb. So many of you may be familiar with echinacea, and we talk about the active ingredient uh, that we want to extract is the alkyl amides. So in this situation, of those 21 standardized preparations, so of the 59 they took, 21 said they were standardized, and only 9 met the quality standard on the label. So 57% did not meet the standard that they suggested that they had on the label. So that's a 50-50 chance. It's a crapshoot with when you're buying herbal products at the health food store. And this is something that I point out on a regular basis with my patients who say, I've tried that and it didn't work. Or uh, situations where I also want to look at the cost effectiveness of a product that they have, assuming that it is labeled appropriately. And that's really where we want to take our discussion next is labeling and understanding. So many of you have probably recognized recently that in your standard process shipments that you're getting a new product catalog. And the MediHerb product catalog is just one of the best resources for learning about herbal preparation and MediHerb's, kind of mission or quality standards. And it's about a 30-minute read to get through the first third of the product bulletin, but it teaches you so much about herbs. It's virtually a textbook. And so I want to take the product catalog and utilize some of its information as we go on today. We'll be referencing that. So some of these slides may be not as easily readable as I'd like, and just know that most of the material is from the product catalog. So I believe it's on page 31 of the product catalog. There's a page on how to read a label, and that's what we want to go through today, so that we can assess other professional products as well as over-the-counter products and make an assessment as to what's a quality product. So the first place that we want to look as number one is the common name, and the common name in this instance on this example is echinacea, and the next place that we want to look, and we're going to go ahead and skip ahead to number 5, is the botanical name. So you'll see right here we have echinacea, and right here we have its botanical name, which is Echinacea angustifolia. Or in this instance, holy basil is our common name, and its botanical name is Ocimum tenuifolium. That's important because we need to know exactly what plant we're getting. So as we learned in that study that we just talked about, the assayed species was only correct half of the time, and you'll notice here a little blurb from Wikipedia that there are at least 9 species of echinacea. So it's important that we understand what it is that we're getting when we buy an herbal product. Another common or another one to consider is rhodiola. And you'll notice with in the product bulletin, or sorry, the product catalog, under each of the headings for the different products, they have little blippets or blurbs that talks about issues that are associated with that herb, whether it may be its scarcity or its preparation or difficulties in extracting or finding uh, plants that are grown particularly to have the active constituents that we want to provide a therapeutic dose. So, for instance, in this situation, rhodiola, when you look at Wikipedia, there's actually quite a bit of diversity on uh, what professionals think how many species there are. So some say 36, and some say 60, and China says maybe somewhere around 90. Uh, but when we look at what MediHerb uses, of course they're using rhodiola or rosea, and its common name is referred to as the golden root or the rose root, and it grows in high altitudes. Uh, the problem is, with regards to, let's assume there's 16 uh, common species of rhodiola, uh, only 11 of those have been studied in animal studies, and only really one has been studied extensively in humans, and that's rhodiola rosea. So it's very important that an herbal label gives you not only the common name, but also its botanical name. So here's a great example of a poorly labeled echinacea product that does not tell us what it is. It tells us it's echinacea, and it tells us its aerial parts. But it does not tell us the species, so we do not know if that is angustifolia or purpurea, or if it's a completely separate echinacea plant that may have no medicinal value whatsoever. The next thing we look at is the plant part and the extract ratio. So that's pretty simple. Plant part in our illustration here is the root, and its extract ratio is 4 to 1. So very simply, the extract ratio is what we already talked about. That indicates the strength of the extract. So the number on the left represents the amount of herb, and the number on the right represents the amount of extract. And if you remember back to the slide that we showed, we had 1 flower to, in that example of a tincture, 5 parts of water, or extract, or solvent. So it's important that we understand this extract ratio because it tells us how much of the final product we're actually getting. So plant parts, there's a host of different plant parts, and obviously different herbal constituents are going to be extracted from different plant parts. And I'm sure many of you are aware, when dealing with echinacea, if we want to extract the alkyl amides, which are what we believe are the active constituent within the echinacea plant, those are only going to be found in the root. So it's not uncommon that you may uh, see it illustrated as the radix. So we're looking at Latin terms. So oftentimes it says herb or herba. So again, that's the aerial parts of the above ground parts. So you can kind of utilize this page as, we're not going to go through it, but an idea of different plant parts and how they could be listed on an herbal label. So again, this example that fails does tell us the species, and it does tell us the parts. But as we know, if we were trying to achieve a level of alkyl amides to get a therapeutic benefit for regulating an immune response in a person with, for instance, autoimmune disease, this would be a worthless product because it does not have the part that we want, which is the root. So some plant parts are going to have different benefits, and that sort of reads in the page here on the how to look at on the plant part, where we're dealing with liver function versus healthy urine flow. So in this situation, you see you get a 150 milligram capsule of dandelion leaf. So if a person was utilizing this as something to improve liver or gallbladder function, to improve bile production, this product would be a fail. Now, if this was a product that we were using to improve urinary tract health, it may be more beneficial. However, we also have to consider therapeutic dose. So this is a freeze-dried, non-extracted dandelion leaf, and you're getting about 150 milligrams of that dried herb per capsule. So you're going to need 6 of those to get to a therapeutic dose, assuming therapeutic dose is about 1,500 or 1.5 grams. And if so, I'm going to exit full screen and take us to the MediHerb catalog. And MediHerb catalog, if we were to look up dandelion, you'll notice that MediHerb has 2 different liquid extracts of dandelion. And when you look at the dandelion leaves here, that's extracted at a 1-to-1 ratio. 5 milliliters, which is a teaspoon of that extract, will get you a full 5 grams. So MediHerb suggests its therapeutic dose is 5 grams in a day, whereas this guy would be getting you 1.5 grams if you take 6 of them. This is where I start to explain to patients the importance of value and cost. So the next thing we look at is extract ratio. And if we don't see an extract ratio, like in this example here, we can only assume that this is a dried whole herb. Because it's an assumption. Because no extract strength is given, we have to just guess that this is dried herb that's been ground up and put into, in this case, a capsule. So the extract ratio is important because it gives us the strength or how much dried herb we're actually getting. So again, this is an example that's very challenging because they're giving us a blend, and they're not actually telling us how much of each of those components are in there. So we've talked about plant part and extract ratio. Now we're going to look at what is it, number 4, which is the extract. So on those previous examples, it did not tell us if it was an extract or a dried herb, so we just have to assume it's dried. And so with a good label, it should tell you that this is extracted, or that, like in this example for holy basil, not only do they have the herb extract, but they also have the essential oil. So again, essential oil is different than an extract. And the quantity of the starting material. So number 6, if we go right here, this is really how much herb you're getting. So if we look at our echinacea root, and it says it has a 4-to-1 ratio, and in that given tablet there's 125 milligrams of that strong extract, it's the equivalent of you consuming 500 milligrams of echinacea angustifolia root. And remember that our therapeutic dose for most herbs is probably 1.5 grams to 3 grams. So a dosage on this product of 3 a day would meet that standard. Whereas when we look at that label, we do not have an extract ratio, so we assume that this is a dry powdered herb. So we'll call that a dry herb. And it doesn't give us the starting materials. So we don't know how much we're actually getting, and in this situation, it tells us not only that we're getting echinacea, but we're getting 2 different kinds. But it doesn't tell us how much of each, nor does it tell us how much of any of these other constituents. So when a patient brings a product label like this in, I, I, I really look at therapeutic dose and I say, okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ingredients that make up 450 milligrams. So if we take 450 and just to be nice, we divide by 6, there's guessing about 75 milligrams of each of those constituents. Now, generally, labels are listed in terms of amount, so it could be 445 milligrams of echinacea in 1 milligram of each of the following. And and that's a terrible way to list a label. And so I make no bones about it when I talk with patients. I say they could absolutely be giving you 1 milligram of golden seal, and this product could cost $22. And to get a therapeutic dose of echinacea, assuming that it's 75, is going to be 20, 22 tablets or capsules to get that dose, compared to uh, what we saw was perhaps uh, 2 echinacea tablets from a more quality product like MediHerb. So number 7 is the quantity of our extract, and that's how much is put in the tablet, or in this case, how much the serving would be in our liquid herb. And so it's pretty simple when we see that 4-to-1 ratio to just think 125 times 4 equals 500. So this is how we're getting our therapeutic dose. And you see that across the board. 100 milligrams, 5-to-1 extract, 500 milligrams. 100 milligrams, the 10-to-1 extract gives you 1 gram. So this label is of andrographis complex, I believe, and you'll notice that the, the namesake you're getting is a full gram per tablet. So 2 tablets and you have reached your therapeutic dose for the day of that product, which in this case is andrographis. So the last thing is the quantity of the extract. So like in this label, uh, we have 250 milligrams, and it does not tell us the strength of the extract. So we can't make a determination of how much herb of actual final product herb that the patient is getting. So if this was a 1-to-5 extract, they would be getting 50 milligrams. If it was 1-to-1, they would be getting 250 milligrams, but they don't tell us that. And my suspicion is because we're talking about a standardized product, and this is where some dubious or poorly made herb companies or poorly labeled herbs do us a disservice, because they're trying to achieve a standard. Uh, and unfortunately, when you have a standard, it typically lowers the overall field of quality. And I'll explain that in just a sec. So so number 8, quantified activity or standardization. And so let's just go straight to the product catalog and read what it says about quantified activity versus standardization. So at times we receive an herb that has higher levels than our minimum specification. So you as the clinician receive that higher level of activity. We never dilute to meet a minimum specification. Herein lies the difference between something that is quantified activity versus something that is standardized. With standardization, extracts with an active level that exceeds the specified standard would then be diluted to fall within that standard. So let's pretend that we got a really quality batch of coffee, and it has just been freshly roasted, and it's out of the roaster, and we grind it to the most perfect powder, and we pour our almost but not quite boiling water through it, and we achieve the most perfect extraction of coffee. So much so that it's just stronger than any coffee you've ever had. Even though you made it basically the same way, but the beans were just so much better, and it was just roasted and just out of the roaster, and because it was so higher quality, you got a better extraction ratio. So when when we achieve a result like that, we want to give that or hand that down to the consumer. That's what we would call quantified activity. So it's met our standard. This coffee is already so much better than our normal. We're going to leave it that way. Unfortunately, what other herbal companies will do is they will measure, for instance, one important part of golden seal is the alkaloids, um, hydrastine, when they didn't actually list it on this label. So they're standardized of this standard extract that they don't tell us what the ratio is, is 5% of that extract is those alkaloids, assuming that they're telling the truth. So if their extract was really awesome and they got 7%, they are going to water that product down so that they can make more money. So that's what when I see things that are standardized and I don't see an extract ratio, it makes me wonder if this was watered down, because it may have started as a 1-to-2 ratio, but because they got such a high yield on their product, they watered it down. So it was a 1-to-2, now it's a 1-to-4. And even though it has 5% of these alkaloids, it doesn't tell us our starting material quantity. And so this is, again, a dubious product that's poorly labeled, and we can't be certain of what we're getting. So this doesn't mean that standard process does not, MediHerb doesn't look at uh, standardization as a means for determining efficacy of their product, but they don't use it as a least common denominator. So a good example would be tribulus. And in this example, we see that tribulus is extracted in this tablet at a really high ratio, 55 to 1. And 55 to 1, and we start with 245 milligrams of the product. So we do the math, and that comes out to about 13.5 grams. So if we're looking at therapeutic dose, we've got therapeutic dose coming out our ears. However, with tribulus, the thing is that the primary studies on the efficacy of tribulus were done on tribulus that was grown in Eastern Europe. So and the tribulus that was used contained a specific amount of these furanstanol saponins. And it is likely that these furanstanol saponins are the constituent which impart the benefit of tribulus. And as such, there's probably a reason why there is such a high amount, was in order to extract enough of that standardized or active ingredient to achieve a therapeutic dose. So one of the things that we didn't really talk about today, but was obviously sourcing of the herb and making sure that it's coming from a quality source. So with regards to tribulus, what we've learned about tribulus is that active ingredient, that furanstanol saponin, which when you look at the HPLC, is this little peak in the HPLC right here, only tribulus that's grown in Bulgaria and Slovakia actually contain that protodiacetin. If you grow it in China, it doesn't have it. If you grow it in Australia, it doesn't have it. So this is another place where dubious herbal companies will dupe an unsuspecting public by giving them tribulus, which is a very expensive herb, uh, and it has no beneficial activity because it does not contain that protodiacetin. So when when I don't see, so this is again what makes this even more of a difficult concept, which is why we're talking about it today. Is we know that we've got the right species, but in this case, this species grown in Australia or China doesn't work. So this is where things like high-powered liquid chromatography and gas chromatography and different chemical measurements are required to make sure that you have a quality herb for making your initial extracts from. So the thing that might be that would also be a concern is sometimes you may see something that is standardized, and what they've done is they have extracted a poor quality herb, for instance, perhaps a tribulus from China, and then they have some fashion created in the laboratory this protodiacetin, and then they spike their product with protodiosine to give it that therapeutic dose, but it's no longer a naturally produced glycical extract of that herb. So this is one of the things that some suppliers will actually do is they will give an herb to an herb company, and they'll say this is the finest uh, herb with the highest content of protodiosine or alkyl amide, and when they actually do the laboratory testing, it is borne out that they've actually spiked that extract with that active ingredient to make it look better than it really is. But that does not wash when you're doing uh, high quality lab testing to determine the quality of your raw materials, which is one of the things that you can read about when you look at the first third of the product catalog. It goes into pretty good detail about how extensively raw materials are checked and tested before they are put to work as a Mediherb product. Finally, number 9, we look at excipients. And excipients, um, in general, really this is just what's necessary for the manufacturing process. And it's important that, particularly with herbal tablets, that they dissolve very rapidly and they absorb and assimilate very quickly. So with many tableted products, there's a difficulty in getting something that holds together but disintegrates quickly upon digestion. So, and obviously things that are going to help with ease of swallowing. And I don't run into that too often with herbal products, but it's not uncommon to see colorings and FD and C number 6 and yellow lake number 5 in some lesser quality products that patients bring in sometimes. And so I like to point those out when I feel like they could be an issue. So that brings us to kind of a new feature in the product catalog, which is this idea of core products and a little bit of a breakdown of body systems. So we're going to skip ahead and just look at the breakdown of these body systems, and you'll see that it's we're in this instance, this is the musculoskeletal system, and the different Mediherb products that would be utilized to support musculoskeletal issues. And you'll notice that we get this little image of the little bone, and then in the brown we have our endocrine organs uh, on the body here, and we break those endocrine organs down into the adrenals, the pancreas, and the thyroid. And our little symbol for endocrine is this little hexagon, I guess, uh, with an E in it to tell us that this is the endocrine system. And of course, we've got male health, and that's our international male signal symbol, and the products that would support men that are under 50 and over 50. Uh, Further, we go into female health, which is appropriately pink with a little female symbol, and the different areas that are uniquely feminine, and the different strategies from an herbal standpoint, those that deal with menstruation or PMS, those that deal with women that are in childbearing years, and those that are in the menopause. Uh, and of course, we have skin, which is a little fingerprint. I would think of skin more as tissue, connective tissue. The nervous system, which is a little neuron, and it's purple, and you see that illustration in purple, and see how these all color coordinate. I believe these are actually now posters, and what great posters. And immune system. So when we think of the immune system, we think of the thymus and the spleen and the bone marrow and parathyroids, apparently hypothalamus. And we look at products that are short term, or somebody that's acutely infected with perhaps like a cold or a sore throat or something like that, versus somebody with a more long-term immune challenge, like perhaps an autoimmune disease. So you can see right away it's very easy to, when I think I need a long-term immune system product, I can look at things like echinacea premium or astragalus complex as ways to address that. The cardiovascular system is in red, pretty obvious, and we get a little heart with a little heart's little EKG symbol, and things that are primarily towards heart health versus circulation, which is a good thing to remember. Uh, where particularly because I like to use things like ginkgo and Vitanox to really improve peripheral circulation, especially to the brain when I'm dealing with uh, things that are more dementia related versus a person that has an overt heart problem. So when I'm thinking about heart, I'm thinking about hawthorn, I'm thinking about herbavital, I'm thinking about garlic, and when I'm thinking about circulation, I'm thinking more about ginkgo and things like Vitanox. So respiratory system is a green, and that's lung, and we have short-term lung problems like colds and bronchitises, and long-term lung problems, which would be obviously things like emphysema or asthma. And we have the digestive system breakdown into upper, which is more, stomach, heartburn, indigestion problems versus lower gastrointestinal digestive system stuff, which is going to be more colon, bowel type situations. And finally, we wrap up with the urinary system, which is kind of our little symbol is bladder, and I guess I skipped digestive, which is the stomach, and respiratory, which are the lungs. So if we go back to that initial page, when we go to the core products, you can see that some of these actually cover multiple bases. So one of the products that I use more and more recently is the Gotu-Kola complex. And I guess I tend to think of it as being a musculoskeletal product because that's what I tend to be using it for, is people that have undergone surgery or have injured a joint or knee, and I need some tissue repair. So I think of it in that fashion. But it's easy to overlook that your skin is a connective tissue, and your heart is a connective tissue, and your digestive tract is one big mucous membrane and connective tissue. So Gotu-Kola actually covers quite a few bases with regards to, including endocrine, with regards to the different systems that it can influence. So this is a great little reference guide that they've included with the product catalog that will give new users of herbal products a great place to jump off and start learning. So, for instance, if I needed a product to help with the endocrine system because I knew that there was a hormonal imbalance, right away I can start looking at adrenal complex, gymnema, rhodiola ginseng, Gotu-Kola, and thyroid complexes possibilities. And using my product catalog, I can go to the adrenal complex and I can look up what constituents are in that adrenal tableted product. Now, that's a great place to start, a good place to jump off. And if you need more education on that, this is where we go to textbooks. So Carrie Bone is arguably the world's leading herbalist and prolific author and the founder of MediHerb. And he has several excellent textbooks on exactly the topics that we've discussed tonight. So if you need to know more about adrenal complex and the constituents therein, or rhodiola ginseng, you can start reading about them in these textbooks. If you want to start blending your own liquid herbs, which is a very deliver very therapeutic doses, excellent book. And that wraps up our presentation for the day. So I'm going to exit the full screen and see if there's any questions for today or any comments. And if you'd like to post those in the chat menu, feel free, and I'll try to answer those as best as I can. Thank you.